How's it going? I'm Jared, and I'm going to dive right into this story to reach Japan. I thought overall it was a really interesting story with really artistically woven in symbolism and imagery that pretty much drive the themes of the story and create the characters. So thought it was really interesting. So this is page one. I don't know if this is going to come out reversed, but I'm working with a Mac here. I'm a PC guy working with a Mac. So on this page, what I thought was really interesting when it talked about Peter, it talks about how he basically uh, he has a good relationship with, it seems like, his daughter. He's very happy, smiley, but he needs to get out of the way, and he wants to get out of the way, but he doesn't want to leave. So I thought that was really interesting. And basically, my interpretation was he's loving, but he's not very emotional. He doesn't portray emotions, and you see that throughout the story. Um, he and then at the bottom of the page, what I thought was really interesting was it talks about Peter's mother leaving Soviet Czechoslovakia into the Western Europe, and obviously it's an allusion to the rise of the Soviet Union and how you probably didn't want to be in the Soviet Union. Uh, and there was something about Greta being ignorant. She kept forgetting the name of the mountains that he crossed. So I think that says a lot about Greta. That it's kind of like she's kind of separate from Peter, or distant in the fact that maybe their cultures aren't exactly the same. Like she doesn't understand him completely, if that makes sense. Um, so that was page one. Page two. Here you go. Got quite a bit of stuff on this page. Um, it talks more about Peter and the story of how he was taken out of Czechoslovakia, and how Greta heard about horror stories that Peter didn't really know about. Um, let's see, represent society. So let's see. It talks about Peter and how when his mom brought him here, she made him become an engineer. So he's very successful, and that reminded me of a lot of my immigrant friends who, their families, when they come here, it's kind of an expectation, since their families, it took a lot to get here, for their kids to be successful. So I was kind of thinking about that when I read that. Um, and then it gets into some really important imagery about Eastern versus Western Europeans, especially women. It talks about how Peter's mom is more skilled at house chores. She's more of the, what you would probably say, the ideal woman, the ideal representation of the gender role of a woman. Um, and then I looked up an allusion to Paradise Lost about how it was about the fall of man. Peter's mom forced him to be sufficient. Let's see. Compassion, Peter was not useful, Greta poems not useful. So there was an interesting contrast how Peter, his profession seems more useful than Greta's profession, and Greta happens to be a poet, which we'll get into more later. Uh, and then it talked about in this last paragraph here about how Peter basically he doesn't really have opinions on movies, and how he's very boring, pretty much. He doesn't really have opinions on much, or at least he doesn't like to state those opinions. Um, let's see, this is page three. Uh-huh. And let's see, Greta should have realized that. So it talks at the top about how this quote really stood out to me. Greta should have realized that this attitude, hands-off tolerant, was a blessing for her because she was a poet. And initially I thought, I mean, that sounds interesting. Why? I wonder why it's a blessing. But you find out later in the story that a woman being a poet, at least in this day and age, is pretty. It's not exactly widely accepted. It goes back to the theme of gender roles. What should a woman really be doing? Should she be at home cleaning and doing what women should be doing, or should she be this poet? It also talks about, let's see, the difference between poet and poetess, and how where Greta's from, there's just poet, and there was no poetess, adding that feminine touch to the word. So that was driving that theme home. Let's see. And then in the next paragraph, it talks about feminism. Let's see. Feminism did not exist. You would never heard the word. It's just the round of housework and children either, blah, blah, blah. It says, I basically put the theme of suppressing thinking for yourself and thinking in the lens of society, basically. Um, I also put again that Soviet Russia isn't the place you really want to be because of this. It's pretty much they think for you or they kill you. At least that's what I thought of. Um, More traditional gender role imagery. Um, let's see. This summer, Peter was going to spend more than on the job. That's because of Katie and Greta. That's pretty much that page. I don't want to take too long and bore you with all my analysis. Let me see. This is page 4. A little bit of stuff here. What really stood out to me on this page was what Greta was actually wearing to the party. Was she was wearing high heels which slowed her down considerably. Also, most sophisticated black dress zipped up to the back and skimming the waist. So basically, when I think of this, I think of what women are ideally supposed to wear to parties and pretty much what they're expected to wear, but it's hindering her. It doesn't sound very comfortable. So I believe that the shoes and the dress represent society's hold on her, and it's just slowing her down. It's very uncomfortable. Let's see. When she gets to the party that she's invited to, angry woman answers the door and she's like, "What does it look like?" Let's see. I thought that was foreshadowing because Greta's this very happy woman. She's a poet. She's going to this poet party, and then this very angry woman answers the door, and I'm like, is Greta going to be angry too? And I just wrote some review for this page because it was kind of a long paragraph just to refresh my memory. Okay, page 5. Here you go. Let's see what stood out to me on this page. I really like the imagery. Slit around, that phrase when they were talking about people's eyes slit around her, and then they went on with their conversations. I just thought that was really interesting. They're just avoiding her. At least they don't think she's important enough to acknowledge, which is another thing that Greta, I feel that's one of her conflicts is as a female poet, she's not taken seriously. She's just ignored. Let's see. Oh yeah, and it was just awkward. It reminded me of my party experiences. I've never been a party person, and I could really relate to her. It's kind of awkward being there, not really knowing anyone, trying to talk to people. Let's see. It talks about her getting drunk, which seems to be a theme throughout the story. You learn that she does things when she's drunk, or she needs to drink in order to overcome some of her inner conflicts. Foreshadowing for this. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then at the bottom you learn that the lady who answered the door is a writer herself. So I'm like, boom, more foreshadowing. Let's see, some more interesting imagery that I don't think was too super important. Let's see, this is page 6. And rock bottom. Okay, so at the top of the page, I pretty much, I was thinking, dang, this is rock bottom for her. She's on the floor. She's pretty much, I felt like she was waiting for someone to come save her. Then it starts talking about the engineer party, which is a really interesting contrast. The engineers party versus the poet party. Engineers are more stable, but they're boring. So I'm thinking of Peter. Obviously, he's the engineer, and how he's emotionless and he's kind of boring, like a robot. But poets, they're so interesting, but they're unstable. You know, being a poet isn't a very stable job, but it's exciting. Let's see, which goes to another theme of what sacrificing stability for what you love. Let's see, the life of a poet seems unstable. I already said that. Let's see. And then I just went back to the shoe imagery again, because the shoes, when she took them off, it seemed to relieve her immensely. I thought that was symbolic of taking off the gender roles of society, the lens that people see her through. And then this man is introduced, and when he's introduced, I thought instantly that he was boring. I don't know, I just read she pitied his dull, clumping feet. That section right there, I just felt that he was really boring. And she was talking about how she wanted a more important man to come save her pretty much from her situation. And I just asked what's important to Greta, what makes a man important to her. This is page 7. Get a look at that. Let's see. Um, so then you get this contrast between this guy who's actually a journalist and Greta being a poet, and I thought that was an interesting contrast because journalists, I think, in my opinion, would have a more stable job, kind of like the engineers. Maybe he's like the boring version of a poet. Maybe that's why he's very dull. He's a writer, but he's dull. So I thought that was really interesting. Um, and then I also I think this was pretty interesting. Lethal, in quotation marks, lethal. He said referring to the drinks criminal, and I was just like, how are these drinks criminal? I haven't really gotten to figuring that one out yet. And that's a lot of this story. I go back and I see things that I didn't see before. Um, let's see. It goes more into how poets are pretty unstable. Uh, let's see. This situation makes me feel weird. Oh yeah, and it's just like this whole situation made me feel weird because I knew she had a husband, and I felt like she was going to cheat on him basically because she's hanging out so much with this guy. Uh, I did some looking up of definitions. Enraptured, feeling great delight, and I found this in the quote. She was enraptured by the word consider, which I thought was really interesting because there's another time in the story where like she's just interested in one word. Like I think it was awesome. It was like a new word to her, so I thought that was interesting. Um, no need. It's quite. So then this is page 8, right here. Let's see. What is the relationship between? Oh, okay. So I saw this quote and I thought it was really interesting. That's my word, interesting. But no need. It's quite a nice hospital. It's for mental problems, or you might say emotional problems. So I asked, what's the difference between mental and emotional problems? So I feel like that was important. Then I also was talking about the theme of Greta not measuring up to people, or she's feeling worthless, or she's not enough. And I pretty much I got the quote. She thought he was saying that there was something about her that didn't quite measure up to being kissed. The mortification was like being slapped clean back into sobriety. So yeah, she felt like she wasn't good enough to be kissed, and that's pretty much her life, feeling not good enough as a poet. Let's see. And then it talks about how she's been thinking about this guy for a while, and she uses the word uniquely desirable to describe this guy. So it made me think that he's nothing special, but she wants him. Um, let's see. Personification happened when she was like, Peter came home, all this fantasy disappeared. It went into hibernation, her fantasies. So that's personification. I felt like her feelings were just waiting to wake up again like a bear. And that's just what I thought. There's a simile going on here. Let's see, simile that she was describing the weather in her dream. Let's see, Greta has low self-esteem, more low self-esteem. It's a metaphor there. I don't want to take too long. I feel like this video is too long enough. Let's see, this is page 9. There's a parallelism here when she says, "No, dear Harris, no, remember me." Writing the letter is like putting it out in a bottle. So then we get to the title, and hoping it will reach Japan. When I heard of that, I just thought of how like the odds were like 0, like putting a note in a bottle and reaching Japan. So there's something to be said about that. And then scrolling down, a newspaper columnist naturally would not want to be bothered with people calling him home. So I thought that was really cool. It was like a contrast to a poet who was probably wishing people were calling them. So that was a nice contrast between being a newspaper columnist and Greta. He wrote about politics. His writing seemed intelligent, but she didn't care anything about it. She doesn't. I asked. She doesn't care if he's intelligent. I thought that was interesting. Then you get this time jump to when they're about to go on a trip on the train. Let's see. This is page 10. And right off the bat, the biggest thing on this page, I put theme with stars. Greta is once again ignored / deemed not important enough to be acknowledged when she's trying to talk to the kids, who are playing a very violent game, which I'm sure has some significance. Couldn't figure that out yet, though. Let's see. Further down the page, just the theme of being boring. But I thought it was interesting because it says the children Katie's age had no problem with monotony. In fact, they embraced it, driving into it, and wrapping the familiar words around the tongue. Blah blah blah. So basically, I thought about Peter and how he's boring and how that might compare to Peter. The theme of being boring. Let's see, swapping. Oh yeah, then we get into this couple, and then they're talking about some, first of all, allusions like. There's an allusion to Dr. Seuss, Sam I Am, but they were talking about they're changing guards at Buckingham Palace, and I might be completely wrong about this at this point, but I put it sounded like they're swingers or something based on what happened in the next page. It's just like, are they swingers? Let's see. And that's pretty much the most important aspects on that page. Here's page 11. There you go. Let's see. Okay, so something very important when Greg was talking to Katie for the first time, and he's like, "Is your name Rufus?" Like she's stupid or something, and Katie doesn't like that, and I thought that was really interesting. I put Katie doesn't take insults too kindly, in contrast to Greta, who is walked all over. Pretty much, she's ignored. She's low self-esteem, so she doesn't really stand up for herself. I feel, or she's not very assertive. But Katie, man, she doesn't take anyone's crud. So I thought that was an interesting comparison. Let's see. Then you get to his partner, Greg's partner, who is an actor. But this was really cool, or not cool, but interesting. She's into adult entertainment, and that's what she has to do to pretty much pay the bills. And that goes back to the theme of making sacrifices for your passion. How it's hard out there for someone who studies the arts and makes that their life's work. Then you get a simile. Sleek as Madonna. You get some more swingers imagery. At least I thought it made things no end easier, but they had to remember to ask for 2 beds and make sure both got mussed up overnight. So once again, I thought they were swingers, but they're at least honest with each other. In contrast to what Greta's doing to Peter, man, he's cheating on her, or she's cheating on him. So there's a contrast there. Here's page 12. Got some good stuff on here. Let's see. Greta was hoping he wasn't one of those adults who make friends with children mostly to test their own child. So basically, it's talking about, or I thought Greta was looking for love again, like kind of like how he interacts with the child and how he would interact ultimately with Greta. Let's see. Greg is a man who can handle a lot of emotion. Okay, so it talks about how Greg is, playing with the children. He's a preschool teacher, and I put Greg is a man who can handle a lot of emotion. Unlike Peter, so that's a contrast there. And I feel like that's what Greta's looking for, just someone that can be emotionally there for her, unlike Peter. So it kind of makes sense that she's going to cheat on him. I put foreshadowing. Let's see. Greta needs to express herself. I said, for this quote right here, that's what I do. I save myself up most of the time. Careful with Katie, careful with Peter. So she's saving herself up. She's not really expressing herself. Greta needs to express herself. Peter and Greta's relationship. People were giving, other people were not very giving. I thought that was a very accurate representation of their relationship. One's emotional, one's not emotional. Greta's expression as a female writer is down, and she will make. Let's see. Basically, how Greta's sacrificing a lot for her passion. She needs emotional support. That was pretty much the biggest things on that page. Page 13 right here. Let's see. Greta is foreign. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier. Awesome was another new word, or at least new to Greta. So I was like, is it just because she's foreign, or she has these interesting, not obsessions, but interests in certain words. I put, okay, so, this is a really cool paragraph. They were talking about the background story of Greg, and this just goes back, I believe, to like institutions of thought and how in society there's certain institutions that we abide by, and basically, okay, this is really important because Greta is trying to break away from the institution of gender roles as a woman poet, and this guy right here, he was part of this Christian sect that I thought sounded a lot like a cult, but he's breaking away from it pretty much. And I thought it was really funny how at the end of this really weird paragraph about it being cult, they're like, Anyway, he really liked getting all the approval and he liked acting. But yeah, they're basically both breaking away from these lenses that's or institutions of thought, and I believe that's why they eventually cheat with each other because they can understand each other. Unlike Peter, that's another thing to bring up. Peter doesn't really have anything, in my opinion, that's suppressing him. He's got a stable job. He's a guy. But yeah, let's see. This is page 14 right here. And let's see. We get some. I had to whatchamacallit, look up the word berth. It's a fixed bunk room on a ship or a train. So just some definitions right there. When they talk about this conversation where they're like, "Have you got any?" I have not on you. Certainly not. What kind of beast do you think I am? Obviously, I think they're talking about condoms. Um, I asked myself, why is it significant that they're other people? That they pretend that they're other people. When they're like at the top of the page, they talk about, oh, but we're not ourselves basically, and I was like, why is that significant? So those were pretty much the biggest points on that page. Still thinking why that's significant. Maybe they have to be other people to cheat on them or cheat on their significant others, and maybe they have to bring the alcohol in to reinforce that, to make them other people, make them loopy. I don't know. Let's see. This is page 15. Sorry, I keep forgetting to show you. Some interesting stuff going on here. Greta took her attention away from Katie. So she's very selfish. At least that's what the symbolism of her taking her attention off of Katie. She's very selfish in writing her poetry, in indulging in other men. She leaves Katie alone. And let's see. There was an anaphora. Go back, go back. Let's see. I don't try to focus too much on I'll point it out, but I think the themes and everything are more important than the whatchamacallit, the literary devices, but I do have them. I like focusing more on the meat. Let's see. Okay, this is real. Okay, this was very important. Probably one of the biggest symbolism in the whole story. So it basically talks about how Katie, while Greta's gone doing her thing, Katie goes out and she's basically in the middle of these two cars, the train cars, and she's in the middle. And I think it represented how people are trapped in these roles that society expects them to play. And and before that even happens, I remember Greta was like, "Oh, there's no way Katie could have opened this door," and she's basically underestimating the power of this child. So I guess maybe Katie's role in this world, not only is she a girl, but she's also a child right now. So children, I guess, like the expectations are very low. Maybe they're not smart enough. Maybe they're not strong enough. But basically, she perseveres past that, and she gets in between these two trains. And I thought that was very symbolic about how we're all trapped in these roles that society expects us to play. And then it was really interesting. More stuff how she didn't even realize she was in danger until someone came to save her. So maybe we don't even realize that we're in these roles. This is page 16. I feel like I'm writing an essay with my mouth right now. Sorry if I talk too much. Sorry if this is getting too long. Let's see. There was some symbolism. Greta teaches how to overcome. Wait, hold on. Greta grabbed her and hoisted her into her hip and stumbled back against the door that she just opened. I had to look up illustrious. It's well known or respected, admired. I thought it was really interesting. It said the name of their car was the Connaught. I looked up Connaught. What I got was an allusion to the Duke of Connaught, who is this wartime general. I didn't really see any significance. Maybe there is significance. It went over my head. I don't know. The day was sunny but not really warm. Ooh, in that middle paragraph right there, I thought that was really powerful. It reminded me of Peter. He's very sunny, like he looks very happy on the outside, waving warmly, but he's not really warm. He's not really emotional. So I thought that represented Peter in a way. Let's see, Greta covered with a blanket of birth. I thought it was really weird how Katie was like, "You smell bad, get away from me." I thought to myself, can she smell the sex on Greta? I don't know. Katie didn't. Okay, so once again, Katie didn't even realize what was going on until someone saved her. And this whole paragraph down here. So once again, I felt that represented us as a society, all the roles that we play, and how we don't really realize it until someone points it out. Greta is scared from, reflection of her own situation with traditional roles placed on her daughter. So yeah, I put Greta is scarred from seeing the reflection of herself in her daughter. At least that's what I got from it. So just seeing her daughter in the same situation as her, and those gender roles or those roles that everyone in society has. This is page 17, institutional. Okay, so we get more. Let's see. I put institutional expectations in plain sight. Hold on. Why did I put that? Spot that for sure. Could you spot that for sure in any? But oh yeah. So Greg gets off the train, and basically his family is there, and they look like a normal family. They wouldn't look like a cult. But then it says, but how could you really spot that in anyone, or for sure in anybody? So I thought that was true. You never really know what kind of expectations are placed on people just by their outward appearance. But I don't know. Everything's happening internally. That's their internal conflicts. What people have to go through, being looked at through a certain lens in society and expectations placed on them. Let's see. But Katie found it too difficult to look for him. Oh yeah, and then something happened where Greg got off, and Katie was kind of mad that he got off. I'm not really sure what the significance of that. I mean, she was being abandoned, so I think something there is important. There was some symbolism of looking through the lens of society. Okay, so Greta writes this letter to Peter, how she thinks it's funny how people take pictures of mountains instead of actually looking at them for what they are. So I thought that was obviously talking about people looking at other people, specifically Greta, in this gender lenses. And it's a very narrow point of view. So I think not just for women, but any role that people play, like everyone's just looking at each other with these lenses that society makes, and it's very narrowing, and you're not seeing the whole picture. Greta's way more than just a woman. She's a poet, and she's a lot more things than just a housewife. She's breaking those boundaries, more sacrifice. Okay, so poetry was something else Greta was going to have to give up. I thought that was pretty substantial. She loves poetry, and I guess she feels guilty for being so selfish, going through this whole thing with Katie. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't even know if I showed you page 18. Here's page 18. It didn't sound like a happy ending when the weather was described as the day was dark with summer thunder and lightning. So I'm sure there's some significance there. I mean, it didn't seem very happy to me. So there was some imagery with escalators versus stairs, and I was like, how could this be significant? So perhaps the escalator, they were wondering if they should take the escalator or the stairs. It takes you in one direction and you're going up, but you have no control. You're going up, kind of like, I don't know, maybe kind of like the train, this technology theme. Like it's taking you, like you're not in control. It's just taking you where it wants to take you. I mean, that might be significant with the train, I guess, getting on the train, and how it represents kind of the gender roles and how you have no choice. Like society is just a train that you can't stop, maybe. I don't know. And then it was versus stairs, and I thought of stairs. It allows you to move in whatever direction you want. You can go up or down, but more importantly, you're moving yourself. You're thinking for yourself. There's more symbolism, bright, lofty light of Union Station. Like, there's the happy ending. That sounds like a happy ending, or at least they've ended up in a happy place. And then it ends abruptly with Bennett, Mr. Harris Bennett, at the end. And but let's see. Oh, this quote right here stood out to me. She was trying to hang on to Katie, but at that moment, the child pulled away. She got her hand free. So I think that Katie was just waiting to see if Greta was going to be selfish with more men and leave her. But there's my analysis. Some of the things I felt like I really grasped them. The others I could still be learning. But I guess that's the learning process. You go back, you talk with your classmates, your teacher, and you just keep learning. So overall, great story, great symbolism, and yeah, have a good night.